Well, it was busy. From the time we were able to do anything, but there was always chores that we had to help with. And otherwise, I think it was a good place to grow up. There were so many things that we didn't have that they have now, but
Like what?
oh, well, I suppose I was 10 years old before we had a radio.
Yeah.
And of course, there was no television. We didn't have electricity, and we didn't have a car. We never went by with horses and a buggy when we went someplace. And a lot different than it is now. Well, we got up early and did the chores, helped with the milking, and then there was always a separator to wash. And then we'd have breakfast, and of course, if it was during the school year, we'd go to school, and we had to walk. We had about 1.5 miles, I would guess, to go to school. And then when we got home, I change your clothes and get out and shower. And of course, we had to carry in wood and fill the wood box, and we didn't have drinking water in the house. We had to go down to a spring where it was piped into our milk house. But we had soft water, rainwater, for that. I guess that was about our day. In the summertime, my folks lay down for a little nap after dinner. I would run to the barns to play with the kittens during the while that they were napping. So, and being the oldest girl, there were lots of things that I should do. 10 babies, of course, and I had an older brother, but I was the oldest girl. In the evening, after my folks had had supper, then my mother would quite often read story for us, and that was something I looked forward to. And sometimes we'd usually be sitting at the table, and sometimes I'd lay my head in my mother's lap while she was reading. But we had to make up our own games and what we wanted to play with, of course. And
Were you and your mother very close?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, we were. Oh yeah, just fine. She would give me advice and things like that, and I could share things with her that I had questions about, and when I was going to get married, she sat down and told me what kind of a wife I should be. So, well, I don't know. My family seemed to think I'm more like my dad's side of the family.
What's that like?
Like I am.
Describe that.
Well, I don't know what it is they think. For one thing, she was a teacher, and she had a lot of information that I didn't get as a child, as a teenager. But because I didn't get to go to high school, I went out and worked as a maid from the time I was out of 8th grade. And so when I worked for the veterinarian and his family in Elkader, he wanted me to go to high school. And he said he'd help me. Maybe I could go through in 3 years, but that was several years after I'd gotten through 8th grade, and I just was too shy to go to town school.
Did you think that you're too much of a farm kid?
Well, I don't know, I just didn't feel I was going to be comfortable going with those younger kids.
Yeah.
So, oh, that was, I think the Lord guided us. I was working for a family over in that direction, and my brother was working at another farm, and he was sort of dating Sofie Davis, and he was going to take me back to my work, but he took Marie down to her folks first, so I rode along, and that's how I met my husband, and he offered to take me home, but my brother said he would do that. And then I said to Odin, I thought Ray was such a nice man, and he said, he's too old for you. He was 9 years older than I was. So, but then it wasn't too long until we started dating, and that was it. And he was a good husband.
What were some of the qualities that you just loved about him?
Well, he was such a, well, I know what you call it, honest and a good worker, but he expected everybody else to work hard. So, no, he just was a real decent person, and I admired that. So, I think we had dated several times before he even put his arm around me. So, but I enjoyed him very much. So, we went together 2 years before we got married. Well, it was fine, except 3 of his sisters were still there. And it wasn't like well, I was more like a visitor than the housewife. And then they, after 6 months, and they moved out, and we would quite often sit down in the barn after the chores were done and visit, so we had a little privacy. But anyway. Oh, milk cows, pigs, sheep. And I helped with the milking, and chickens we had.
What were your crops?
Oh, corn and hay and oats. Yeah, quite a lot different than it is now. But I had learned to drive the tractor while I was still at home, so that I was able to do that. Oh yeah, I did.
What parts of it did you enjoy and which part did you not enjoy?
Well, since I grew up on the farm, I guess I just took it all for granted. I guess one of the things I enjoyed when we were youngsters at home, the neighbor kids would get together and play in the evenings. we had kids on both sides of our farm, and we'd get together and play games. And summer, or in the wintertime, we'd go sleigh riding and things like that. Well, I kind of feel like since my parents were both Christians and we went to church from the time I was little, it really hasn't changed that much, I guess. I often think if, like some people who know when they accepted Christ, and I can't say when I accepted Christ because it was always part of my life. My grandfather was the choir director for as long as I could remember at the church where we went, and I was baptized and confirmed and married in the same church. And then when we got married, we joined, or my husband belonged to this church on Sweet Ridge, and I've belonged there ever since. Over 70 years now.
Wow.
So, well, when I was still in confirmation, we were to read the Bible, so I read that through a couple of times, and even after. But now I have a devotion book, and I read, and then there's Bible part that you're supposed to read to understand the book, and then in the evenings I read not the same books, but I have some books that I read in the evening too.
Yeah.
So. Well, I guess I had good parents and a good husband, and I guess that is it. And my children are all, well, I should say Christians, church attenders, and so that makes me happy. And my children are all good friends, and that is also a blessing. Well, I get up, wash up, get dressed, read my devotion, have breakfast, do the dishes, and then sew quilt blocks. When I was in Garnaville, I used to walk about 2 miles every morning. That's what they told me the trip around the town was, and so I walked that every morning. But I don't do a lot of walking now. Well, I really enjoyed our trips to Norway. I enjoyed the people I went with, but the relatives over there were so seemed to enjoy that we came, so appreciative that we came, and so that was a lot of the fun. And it was interesting to see the place where my dad grew up, and I sure was glad I got to do that. The first time I went with my brother, let's see, I guess I went with my brother Joe. I don't remember, I'm sure. And then the second time I went, another brother was going, and their children gave them this trip for their a wedding anniversary gift, and they asked me to go along. And then I told them I thought my son, Paul, was going sometime. And so I kind of, and then they called Paul, and he said he would go. So then I couldn't turn it down. And then the next time, then Dorothy and Joan and her children were going. So I went again. But I know my trips to Norway are over. For one thing, I couldn't afford it. Just seeing family, and they would get together for a meal. And at the home, they had everything so fancy. Their table set so fancy, and the dishes, and went to so much trouble, if that's what you call it. But it was very enjoyable. They did that each time we were there. It was, first time I went, it was just frightening when you got into the airport and everybody spoke Norwegian, but as I, it came back to me, and so I was able to do pretty well. They were real patient. They would, when they talked to me, they would talk slowly so I could get it. When they talked to each other, they'd chatter it away. My father and mother.
Yeah.
My father was 19 when he came, and my mother's parents came, and her father was 5 when he came, and her mother was a teenager when she came. And my dad kept the Juvik name, while his brothers who came over, they changed theirs to Olson because their dad was Ole. So, but I was always glad he kept the name because there were lots of Olsons. Well, we always had plenty to eat because we were on the farm, and we had the milk and the cream, and my mother baked bread, and we had a garden. So we never suffered as far as being hungry. And I don't think we really realized that it was a depression, because it had never had luxuries, and so my mother sewed clothes for us, and so I guess didn't really realize that it was that hard times. Asking them, when we were going to country school, about the only thing that they expected people to do was I can't even think now. But anyway, each child would get a card of those stamps that you would sell. They still sell them, but they come in big. And that was $1 worth, and that's what. And you went to your neighbors and sold these stamps. I can't think of what it is. We still get them. But anyway, they didn't expect much of you. So there are so many changes that, from well, we thought we were real fortunate when we got our new tablet and pencil and 8 colors in a box. And so, yeah, when we went to school, we had to go to the neighbors and get a pail of water for the drinking water, and then you had your own cup and a dipper to dip into your cup. That was the drinking water. And then when I was, I would guess maybe about 8, my dad got his first car, a Ford Touring car, they called it. and that was really quite a thing. So, so kids sat in the back seat and my mother and father in the front seat. No seat belts. And so, and we didn't go a lot. When we went, it was down to get the groceries. And then on Sundays, we'd usually go to one of the aunts or uncles, spend the afternoon, and that was our day out for the week. So, very few people sew their own clothes. And then, of course, the television and computers and all of those things. So there are too many changes to be even able to think about all the changes. Well, for one thing, when the parent wasn't able to stay alone, they went to one of the family to stay instead of where there are care centers and things now. Yeah, so my grandma stayed at her home till she passed away because her youngest son stayed with her. And then, but my grandfather stayed with my folks for a while, and then he stayed with my aunt for a while. But that was the thing then, to go to the children. Think and my mother was with us for 6 years, I think it was. And then she went to the care center. And when she got so I couldn't leave her alone, and the first Sunday that Ray went to church alone, I could have cried. So, and then a lady would come in one afternoon a week and stay with her so I could go in and get groceries and things like that. Well, it's different for both children and grown-ups now than it was when I was a child. I think we're all slightly spoiled. Well, we have so many things, so many advantages that they didn't have at that time. And so, you baked your own bread and you butchered and didn't have freezers, so they canned the bread or the meat. And so that was different. It was a lot of hard work. And another thing that's changed that surprises me is then the lady stayed home and worked, and the men, if they weren't farmers, they went out. And now the other day I saw where there's a lady sheriff. And I thought about how my grandparents would have thought that was sure something. You know. Well, it was enjoyable. It was a lot of hard work, but Ray was a good help. He never disciplined the children. He told me what they shouldn't be doing. And he never spanked any of them except, I think it was Russell, he potched on the backside once when he had gone into the cow yard when there wasn't safe there for him. But otherwise he never disciplined them. And that was my job. But he was a good father.
So how many kids did you have?
5. And the same as in my family, except in my family, was second. I had an older brother, and in our family, Dorothy was oldest, and then Carol was the youngest, and Agnes was the youngest in our family too. So just that my brother was older than I, and but even when you have that many children, eventually you're alone. And I have said before that even though you think just as much of one of your children as the other, it's still the hardest when the oldest one leaves and the youngest one leaves. And I guess losing your parents are hard. My dad died quite young, in his early 70s, and my mother lived to be 94. And of course, losing my partner, but he was in the hospital for almost 2 months, so we had bought our home in Garnavillo, and right after we had signed the papers, then my husband had the stroke. He'd had one stroke before that, but not that it disabled him very much. And then that was 2 months before he had this one, last one. But after he had the last one, then he wasn't able to speak or anything. So going ahead and having the sale, and although my boys were good help with me, and then moving by myself, and there was so much going on with all of that. Then after I moved in Garnavillo and got things kind of in order, all of a sudden it came to me, I'm going to be alone. So that was a hard time. But my children have always been real good to me, and having Dorothy and Bill live that close by has just been a blessing. I often think what would I have done if they were still out in Colorado, Arkansas, where were they? Arizona.
Yeah.
And so this is so great. It's so nice to have Dorothy do these things, but it doesn't seem like Bill minds her doing these things for me, which, it could be hard if he resented it. I hope I can get out and drive my car again, but we'll see. Well, I have 15 grandchildren and 27 great-grandchildren. And I don't get to see them as often as I'd like to. The great-grandchildren probably wouldn't even recognize me, because I haven't seen that much of them. They're so scattered from clear out to California. But I get pictures and
They are just about in every four corners. Nick is in New York and Leslie in Florida and
and
Dan's children in California.
California. Well, be good to each other so you can be a happy family and don't forget the Lord. I think that's such a sad thing now. When we were kids in our country school, we'd have a prayer before church, before we started school in the morning. Now they'd never dare do that now. Well, there have been lots of changes. That's all I know.